Oh, all right. Three things that I would do differently when starting my very first company. Were I to start that company today, take 0. All right, so I started my first company, operating company that I would run myself in 2015. That was my systems integrator. Up to that point, I had invested in other companies, not just through the stock market, but as a private equity investor, some various contractors and stuff. But none of the companies that I was a quote unquote owner of up until 2015 did I run myself, operate myself. And if I were to do that again, what would I do differently? Three things. So in order for me to answer that, let me explain kind of how I originally did it. So when I created my systems integrator, when I created Intellic Integration, that Intellic Integration came out from an idea that I had worked for 2 world-class systems integrators, and when I was working for one integrator, the second integrator, I was the manager of Texas operations. So I had been hired as a senior engineer to lead the largest standalone SCADA system build in history. So single server implementation. That was me leading 19 developers over 18 months. This is the big ignition project that, where my ignition career started, where I really was known by everyone in the industry. So I was hired to lead that project, but pretty quickly, within a couple of months me getting hired, the guy who hired me, who was the nephew of the owners, his father was one of the founders of the company. There were 3 brothers who led this integrator. The guy who was basically in charge of business development there, his father had passed away a few years earlier. Suddenly, he was working for his 2 uncles. He basically wanted to become president of the company, and they wouldn't allow him to do that. And so he left. He actually left for a competitor, which, by the way, is just, even to this day, this is like fucking, this is probably, this is almost 10 years ago now. It's still one of the most fucked up things I've ever seen in my career. I've never, to basically just shit on your father's legacy and go work for a fucking competitor, compete against your uncles, and all because your uncles wouldn't make you president of the company, which, by the way, the uncles were right not to make him president. Anyway, he left, and the owners of the company were concerned that me and this other guy that this guy had hired were going to leave the company. So they promoted both of us nearly immediately to made me the manager of Texas operations, and they made the other guy the manager of Washington operations. This company was based in California. And so over the next 2 years, I built all the business in the state of Texas. From hiring the staff to selecting the office to, developing the business development strategy, the engineering strategy, the project management strategy. I did everything from the ground up. And I learned during that process that there was a better way to do this. Better way to do it for the employees, better way to do it for the clients, better way to do it for manufacturers. And so I had a conversation with my wife at the time, and I said, I just don't think I'm going to be able to do what I want to do here, and I think I could do it better in my own gig. I think I'm going to create my own integrator. So I did. So the first thing that I would do differently, is the first thing that I did was I created the name of the company. And I came up with Intellic Integration, which is a combination of intelligent logic. So Intellic is intelligent logic integration. And, I'm happy with what I did with the logo. I'm In fact, I like the name, but if I could do it over again, I wouldn't call it Intellic Integration. Not because I don't like the name, but because people mispronounce it. They call it Intellect. They just don't. It doesn't have the impact for the consumer that it had for me. And so one thing I would do is I would do my homework a little bit better on coming up with the name of the company. Okay, and you'll know. And in all the subsequent companies, I got the names right. But that first one, Intellic Integration, I wouldn't have. I would have done more. I would have taken the name to more people to see, let them read it, let them look at it to see how that played out. That was number one. All right. Number two, when I went. So basically, what happened was I created the company, and then the company I was working for, they were doing some shady shit with, there's a story I told about, an employee I had, a girl that I had hired who wanted to be hourly instead of salaried. She wanted 2 weeks vacation. Our company said, no, you hourly people only get one. We're happy to make her hourly. She's only going to get 1 week vacation. And then fought really hard for that, and HR and everybody said, no, we can't do that. And then like a year later, we were hiring from some field service guys, and they got offers of 2 weeks vacation. And when I went back and I said, oh, this must be a mistake, they said, oh no, we changed it because we were having trouble hiring hourly people, so we added another week. And I said, okay, great, can we give it to this other engineer? And they said, no, we're not going to retroactively. And I'm like, well, what happens when she finds out that these people who work with her are getting 2 weeks and they're the same? And they said, who's going to tell her? And I'm like, well, me. I mean, I'm going to tell her because I'm trans, and they there were things that they were doing that made me, I'm like, wow, it was just fucked up stuff. It wasn't transparent shit. And it really, really bothered me. So as, maybe 9 months after I created Intellic, or 8 months, things came to a head with the company I was working with. And one of the things that I did was I offered to subcontract through the company I was working for. So basically what had happened was they pushed me out of the company, and I knew that most of the clients I was working with were going to come with me. They weren't going to stay with them. They wanted me to be the engineer. They wanted me to be the lead on their project. And so I knew they were going to come with me, and I didn't feel right about that, So one of the things I did was I offered my former employer, I said, I will subcontract with you. These companies are going to want me to do the work. I'm happy to subcontract my company to you. And they turned down that offer, mostly thinking that the clients wouldn't leave. And by the way, every client left. There was not a single client that stayed with them. Moreover, nearly all the staff came with me too. In fact, there was only one person left who didn't come out of that whole office. Out of all 11 people, every single one of them, field service, every single person called. And what I would do differently is, I gave them the chance to subcontract me. They said no. When the clients came to me, I'm no longer in violation because of any agreements I may have had. I wasn't like stealing their clients because I offered to do the work through them, and then they turned it down. And that's what my lawyers told me, that, yeah, hey, based on the way that this is your employment contract is worded, you just have to offer to do the work for these clients through them. If they turn you down, then you're free to work with them directly. What I should have done was, once they realized all the clients were going to come with me, I should have then gone back and offered again. I kind of wish I had done that. Because the integrator that I came from really the leadership really struggled. The two guys who owned the company, they were good guys. One of them I genuinely liked a lot, he was the engineer. The other brother who ran the company was more of a business development guy, and he had a really like traditional way. Yeah, he didn't really understand business, the new business. He didn't understand transparency and authenticity. He didn't understand how important they were. I I I I should have gone back and offered to do the work underneath them once they realized they were losing all the clients. And then the last thing that I should have done differently is I took on a partner. So one of the guys who worked for me at that integrator, he was a little older than me, super experienced, super strong in automation. Everybody loved him. Good guy. I mean, just everyone genuinely liked him. He never burned a bridge in his whole life. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'd love to come with you. And, is there any way I could get, a percentage of the company?" And I gave him a percentage of the company. I don't remember what it was now, but it was something like, 78-22. I had 78%. He had 22%. We had the Intellic was broken into two divisions at the time. We didn't have multiple entities at that time. So, and you had a enterprise business intelligence group, which I led, and then you had the automation group, which included field service, so in which he led. And I ran the whole company. He and I did our executive meetings every month. We'd handle budgeting and everything together, but I ran the company. It was, ultimately it was my vision. And I loved working with him. I still love the guy to this day, but he was at a point in his life where he couldn't commit to building a company. And I let me say this. Most people, most companies fail. Most startups fail. And the reason why is a couple of reasons why they fail. But number one, there's no plan. Okay, there's no plan to scale. And so for the most part, you're just surviving. And then eventually you go broke. Number one, you have an insufficient plan. Number two, you're insufficiently agile. So that is, you are unable, early on when you're starting up a company, you're really testing ideas, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. You're trying to lean into the things that work, and you're trying to lean away from the things that don't work. And you have to be agile to do that. You got to be able to adjust quickly. And then number three, you don't work hard enough. I mean, when I started Intellic, I didn't take a day off for a year and a half. I worked 110 to 120 hours a week every single week for a year and a half. I mean, that first Thanksgiving, I was negotiating a contract for like 9 hours. I mean, today I have people negotiate the contracts for me. I have, we've grown to the point where we have lawyers and stuff that do that. But back then, it was me. I mean, I'm the one. I stopped doing invoicing by that point. For the first 6 months, I did all the invoicing. I ran payroll. I did everything. Even though we scaled pretty quickly. I mean, we jumped in with both feet in February of 2016. We hired our first 1099 in March, first W-2s in April. Everybody was converted to W-2 by June, and we were in our office by June. That's how quick. And then we did our first $1 million in sales by December, by our Christmas party. In fact, we broke $1 million in sales for that first year at our Christmas party at the Cowboys game. But for that first year and a half, I didn't take a day off for 18 months. Most people don't have what it takes to sheer force of will to make it work, get it off the ground. That's why I'm never worried about startups. I know what it takes. I mean, you can tell pretty quick when you meet somebody who started a company whether they're going to make it or not. Like, and by the way, you can make it as, I'm one person. I created an LLC. I'm the only employee. I work out of my house. You know what I mean? You have no overhead. Yeah, you can, that you could do your whole, you could be an independent contractor and be successful your whole career. It's a totally different ball game the moment you want to get into multi-million-dollar projects, multi-phase, where you need to scale up in order to do enterprise-wide deployment. So you got to go from 5 resources for 18 months to 30 resources for months 19 to 24 as you're scaling. Like it's a whole total different ball game when you go from independent contractor to doing enterprise class solutions. This is the reason that like McKinsey and Deloitte and Whip, it's why those companies are always in business, because when a large organization just wants to throw a bunch of bodies at something, there aren't a whole lot of people you can call, right? Well, the problem I made with taking on this partner was he was later in life. He didn't have the ability to make the commit. Like his wife needed him home at 5:30 every night, and she needed him off on the weekends. And there is no way to be successful in a startup where if you're not working at night and you're not working on the weekends. I mean, there's just no way. You don't have any equity to lean into. Now I can afford to take a sabbatical and be off most of the summer to write a new book or work on a new architectural design or whatever. But back then, when I first created Intellic, there was no fucking way I could take I had to work 16 hours a day every single day, and I was still, for the first 3 years at Intellic, for the first 3 years, I was the highest billing engineer in the company. I mean, literally. And it wasn't even close. My utilization was like 115% or something. And the next highest engineer was like in the high 80s, I mean, you have to be able to outwork everybody in the beginning. You have to. And I took on a partner who couldn't do that. So my buyout of that partner when we decided to go our separate ways, I mean, that was a 6-figure buyout of his equity that I had to write a check for, one other thing that I would do differently. We'll do a bonus one. So the 3 are, I would be more deliberate about the name, like making sure that the name, I would have tested the name on a lot of people to see how they read it. The fact that I did intellicintegration.com and I didn't find a shortened domain, it just never occurred to me back then. So now the email addresses are really long. All these little, just tiny details. The second thing is, I would have gone back to my old employer and offered to subcontract through them again. If I could do it over, I would do that. Even though I offered it once, I should have offered it a second time once they realized they were going to lose all the clients. And then number 3, taking on a partner. The mistake wasn't the guy. It was the mistake was he couldn't make the commitment. Like, he just couldn't commit what it took. And so, that cost me, a big 6-figure buyout. Here's the other thing. The bonus one, number 4. In the first 4 years, when we did postmortems in the first 4 years, each year we found about $250,000 of losses in efficiency or mistakes that we could have captured. And it shouldn't have taken 4 years. It should have taken 2. We should have had 2 years of really learning, and years 3 and years 4, we shouldn't have had the $250,000 of just sort of lost equity. But the fact that we were tracking the data from day one, I mean, there's so many things we did right that gave us just an enormous advantage over the competition, and, like one of the things that we do at Intellic really, really well, incredibly well, and actually we do this really well in all of my companies, we are very data driven. So much of our decisions, our operational decisions, are based on data. They're not based on someone's gut or someone's experience. What we quote for projects, we are very confident in the numbers that we're quoting. We are very confident in the number of hours it's going to take. We are very confident in what our costs actually are, because of how data-driven we are. If you were to look at our unified namespace and the data that we use to make our decisions, like how we aggregate everything together, how we look at raw events, like individual time entries for varying for different engineers. I mean, right down to the point where we will go back through a project, say a 2-year long engagement that's, say, had 4 phases of digital transformation, and we will literally go back and analyze each of the time entries and the sequence of the time entries from the engineers to know exactly what they were doing and when, which tasks they were doing and in which order. And then we will take that information and we will apply it to the next time we're looking at an enterprise engagement. We literally put up a genealogy and we see exactly what the genealogy of that project was. No other integrator I've ever worked at has ever done that. I mean, I've never seen any other integrator do that type of thing. There's so much that we do right in terms of, how we were able to scale the way we were. It's all because we were data driven. I mean, we have data and information other integrators don't have. We leverage data and information other integrators don't have. We don't rely on relationships. The relationships are not the key to our business success. Results are. Our reputation's based on results. And it's not based on which vendor we have great relationships with. Because we're actually very antagonistic with vendors. The vendors that we're partners with, who we have partnerships with, we're antagonistic even with them. That we hold their feet to the fire. We see ourselves as an advocate for the client. So there's a lot that we do right. I mean, a lot that we do right, and then obviously that shows in the success of the organization. But I would say there are things that we could have done differently. And this video was about the 3 or 4 things that I wish I had done differently. And the reason I shot this video is, again, for my kids, 2 of my sons work in the family businesses. They see things, with their own eyes, but they weren't there for now they're part of mature organizations with large staffs, and they don't remember a time when we didn't have benefits and half the people were 1099 contractors, and they don't remember that. They don't remember any of that. They don't remember, when we were really fucking sweating. I mean, there were a million times where you're like, holy shit, are we going to make payroll? In the first 24 months. I mean, you start with no money, so I literally started Intellec in February 2016 when we went in with both feet, $20,000. Right, $20,000 in the bank, and same thing with 4.0 Solutions. 4.0 Solutions, I had $25,000, and by the end of the first month, I had to be cash flow positive or it would go bankrupt because I wasn't going to put more money in. Intellec Automation Services, right? Intellec Enterprise Systems, same thing. A lot of, what I'm talking about here are the things that no one ever talks to you about, But I think I'll shoot a second video here on what I would do different for one of my other companies as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment down below, share this video with somebody it might help, maybe somebody who's thinking about starting their own gig, and I'll see you in the next one.